All right, welcome back. Assignment number 2. So we're going to be looking at sports in the 1950s. So what I want you to be doing, this will be a little bit shorter of a lesson, is be looking at how sports are in the 1950s. We're going to be looking at football, baseball, and basketball. And then I want you to think, how are sports the same today? What ways are they similar and what ways are they different? And then for your assignment, you're going to be uh, writing that down in a comment box, in a text box on Canvas, what ways sports are similar and different in the 50s from today. All right, so this is where football starts to become a big deal. Not as big a deal as baseball yet, but it's getting there. So the NFL championship game was televised across the country for the first time in 1951. Football's first great star, Jim Thorpe, dies in 1953. 1954, Joe Perry of the 49ers became the first player to rush 1,000 yards in consecutive seasons. And in 1959, the coach of the Green Bay Packers, Vince Lombardi, this guy right here, becomes coach of the Green Bay Packers. The Packers are sort of like the New England Patriots of the 50s. They are in the championship, if not winning it, almost every year. In fact, the trophy that you get for winning the Super Bowl is called the Vince Lombardi Trophy. So oftentimes he is held up as the greatest football coach of all time. Some of the stars: Frank Gifford played in the 1950s to 60s. During this time, a lot of these players would do what was called go both ways. In other words, they would play offense and defense and special teams. So when your team lost the ball, you didn't get to go sit on the bench. Well, you just sort of changed positions. You were maybe a running back on offense, but you were a linebacker on defense. And then later on, he becomes a very successful broadcaster and announcer of football games. 1957, the Oklahoma Sooners won their 46th game in a row. So that's about 4 straight years without losing a game. That is still a record in college football. Nobody really even comes close to it. Johnny Unitas, nicknamed the Golden Arm. He is the first quarterback to really make passing like the center point of the offense. Before this, even though passes were around, it was still the running back was the main thing. For 52 years, he holds the record for the most consecutive games with a touchdown pass. Drew Brees broke it in 2012. The first great passing quarterback in the NFL. And the championship game that kind of everybody remembers is the 1958 championship game, the Baltimore Colts defeating the New York Giants in overtime. The Ice Bowl, it was called because it was so cold. All right, let's look a little bit about basketball now. One of the great players was Bob Pettit. Plays basketball for LSU and then for the Milwaukee Hawks. First person to win the NBA's MVP award, won the All-Star Game MVP 4 times, and one of the very first Hall of Famers in 1970. George Mikan, called Mr. Basketball. He's the first great Laker back when they were the Minneapolis Lakers. He plays basketball for DePaul. He's a legit 7-footer, and he would stand right underneath the basket, and when you tried to shoot it, he was so tall he could just tip the ball away right as it got to the basket. Because of him, you have the goaltending rule. Today, you can't just stand right underneath the basket and tip the ball away. If the ball is going down, you can't touch it. Well, that rule is there because of George Mikan, because otherwise, simply nobody could score on him. Bob Cousy was born in 1928. He is a point guard for the Boston Celtics, and he is one of the great dribblers and ball handlers in basketball history. So a little video on Cousy.
Through the years, the NBA has featured a cast of flamboyant performers, but they all owe their lineage to the game's original showman, the man known as the Houdini of the hardwood, Bob Cousy.
Hi there. Bob Cousy has dazzled countless fans with his thrilling brand of basketball.
Down to Cousy. Cousy drives in, dribbles by a man, lays it in.
I think Cousy was to the NBA what Babe Ruth was to baseball.
He was a great playmaker, very flashy.
I certainly was aware that my style of playing was attractive to fans in those days. I mean, what I was doing 30 years ago now, every 12-year-old is doing in every schoolyard in the country.
But Cousy was nearly left at the station when it was time to enter the NBA and the 1950 draft.
Someone called me and said, "Coos, congratulations, you're the #1 pick of Tri-City Blackhawks." And I said, "Geez, I was a pretty good student at Holy Cross. I must have been asleep in geography. Where the hell is Tri-Cities?"
Instead of heading to Illinois to join Tri-Cities, Bob decided to hit the road as a driving instructor.
I taught ladies to drive for the next 3 months without considering, frankly, going into the NBA.
But his driver's ed career came to a screeching halt thanks to the luck of the Irish. When the names of several players were placed in a hat, the Celtics drew Cousy.
Cousy, you see, was a great college player. But on a pro level, you couldn't project how good he was going to be.
The Coos instantly revitalized the Celtics. He would lead the league in assists 8 consecutive seasons and transform the game by playing with style.
Another great performance by Bob sees a masterpiece of pull and overhead dexterity.
Well, there's the master passer of them all.
Tonight is Bob Cousy night as a scorer and as a playmaker.
If George Mikan was the first great star of the NBA, then Bob Cousy was the second great star in the NBA. He was the great draw. He did things with the basketball that hadn't been done before.
Bob Cousy, Boston's hardwood Houdini.
I credit Bob Cousy, one of the guys that saved the NBA, because he came to the game and brought the passing skills that were only identified basically with the Harlem Globetrotters.
I probably got as many letters in those days as any player that came through during that period from high school coaches telling me how much harm I was doing to all the kids in the country who were basketball players because they were imitating all this crap.
He knew, and I knew, that no play is any good unless it's completed. So he can get as fancy as he wants and do whatever he wants, but don't lose the ball.
Despite the impact of Cousy, the Celtics still could not win a title. But that would change when they acquired Bill Russell in 1956.
When, Russ joined the fold, we walked away saying, wow.
Cousy and Russell proving an efficient combination.
A new era had begun, with Cousy leading the Celtics' fast break and Russell controlling the middle. A dynasty was born, and the game of basketball had entered the modern age.
Styles of play have changed, too, making for a more aggressive, crowd-pleasing brand of ball. The key to this new style of play is the fast break.
With Russell controlling the backboard, we were in high gear with the up-tempo game, and we were blowing those suckers out of there.
With Cousy as their floor leader, the Celtics had an unparalleled run of success, winning 6 championships in 7 years. One of the most memorable came in the 1962 finals, when Cousy had the title in his hands in the closing seconds.
Cousy trying to kill off the clock with his dribbling.
They were trying to get it, but, it wasn't a threat. So I was just kind of having fun and doing my show-off stuff.
In the '63 finals, Boston would face a rematch against the Lakers. For Cousy, it was his final season, but in Game 6, just as he looked to write a storybook finish, he suffered his most severe injury.
First time I was really hurt seriously in 13 years. So it was a very traumatic moment for me. I wanted to end it, if at all possible, on the floor. I just went out there numb.
But Playmaster Cousy gets his team working, and Tommy Heinsohn scores to make the margin of the Celtics' record triumph 112-109.
We wanted Bob Cousy to go out with the championship series, and thank God we won it.
Win one championship, most guys in a team sport are happy to walk away with that if you can go out on a high note with another championship.
Cousy's sense of teamwork and camaraderie helped instill the famous Celtic pride that made them an invincible dynasty.
Cousy was and is a fine and decent man. And he was the first real captain of the Celtics.
I'm sure the championships we started winning in '57 were far more meaningful than any kind of individual attention.
You had a guy like Cousy who thought we should be winning every game. So that sort of permeated the entire team.
I mean, what it's all about when you work your butts off for 6 or 7 or 8 months to grab the ring is winning the championship.
All right. So Bob Cousy, but of course still the 1950s baseball. And if you were in New York in the 50s and a baseball fan, it was pretty good because the best teams in the country tended to all be in New York. The New York Yankees, the Brooklyn Dodgers, and the New York Giants. So for the first 7 years of the 50s, you had what was called a Subway Series. So a Subway Series is basically where two teams from the same city end up playing. So if you look, Yankees versus Philadelphia, but then New York versus New York, New York versus Brooklyn, New York versus Brooklyn, New York versus Cleveland, Brooklyn versus New York, New York versus Brooklyn, Milwaukee versus New York, New York versus Milwaukee. It's not till 1959 that you don't have a New York team in the World Series, and that's an ex-New York team. The Brooklyn Dodgers become the Los Angeles Dodgers in 1959. When they win the World Series. So good year, good decade for New York baseball. We also see how as the country starts moving out west, sports teams start to move out west. And if you want to pause it here and look at it, you notice a lot of these baseball teams are starting to move out. You know, the Brooklyn Dodgers become the Los Angeles Dodgers. The New York Giants become the San Francisco Giants. The Philadelphia Athletics become the Kansas City Athletics, and then the Oakland Athletics. So more and more teams are starting to go out west and south. Big players of the 1950s, Ted Williams plays all 19 years with the Boston Red Sox, nicknamed the Splendid Splinter, 17-time All-Star, and the last batter to hit over 400. He's also a fighter pilot in World War II and the Korean War. Mickey Mantle, 16-time All-Star for the New York Yankees, 3-time MVP in 12 World Series, wins 7, and could bat either left or right-handed, depending on the pitcher he was facing. And then the last guy we're going to do is Willie Mays, 22 years with New York and then San Francisco Giants, 24 All-Star Game appearances, 24. Just one World Series championship, nicknamed the Say Hey Kid. He's still alive, and he's generally regarded as the greatest still living baseball player. The most famous thing was what was called the catch in the World Series. So I'll show you a quick video on the catch.
Number 5, the Say Hey Kid.
There's a long drive, way back in center field, way back, it is gone! Willie Mays just brought this crowd to its feet with a catch, which must have been an optical illusion to a lot of people.
Number 4.
All right, so that is assignment 2. Be looking at how sports are similar in some ways today and how they are different today from the 1950s. See you next time.